China is conducting military maneuvers in response to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. These are taking place in the skies and waters around Taiwan and are set to expand to live fire drills from Thursday. But they are being watched by countries in the wider region. Foreign ministers of Southeast Asian grouping of nations, ASEAN, are beginning a series of meetings in Cambodia to discuss current issues in the region. And it is already clear tensions over Taiwan are set to figure in the talks.
We hope that, concerned parties do not take actions that may deteriorate or escalate the tensions. And I don't think that the escalation of tensions will help them to solve the problems or, solve the differences. And I, again, emphasize the need, for all the concerned parties to reaffirm, the position to all of these basic principles so that we can make sure that, Taiwan Strait will be a peaceful part of this region.
And joining me now from Manila is Richard Hedarian. He's an author, columnist and political scientist and has written extensively about China's relations with Southeast Asian nations. Richard, what do you see is the wider impact of Nancy Pelosi's Taiwan visit on ASEAN nations?
Well, definitely there's the element of geography, right? So if you're in the Philippines, Taiwan is just across the Luzon Strait. So if anything happens there, it will have a direct impact on countries like the Philippines. There's also the aspect of South China Sea. As you may know, South China Sea embraces huge parts of Taiwan, and it's also where a number of Southeast Asian countries have claims. And we have seen, based on recent reports, that China one of its retaliatory measures is to conduct live fire exercises across South China Sea following the visit of Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. The other thing, of course, is the fact that Taiwan and China both have very good economic relationship with many countries in the region. So even though majority of Southeast Asian countries have a one China policy, meaning diplomatically they only recognize Beijing as a true representative of Greater China, but they have also very robust economic investment ties with Taiwan. So that's why this is very complicated for a lot of us in the region.
Which is why ASEAN nations have generally been reluctant, haven't they, to pick sides between the US and China when it comes to their rivalry in the Pacific. But do you think they are slowly being pushed into the direction of picking one?
Right. Well, not picking a side is a choice in itself, right? So definitely there are countries in Southeast Asia which will be fence-sitters forever, or they'll try to do that. But at the same time, let's not forget, the Philippines, Thailand are U.S. treaty allies. So in an event of conflict, if God forbid it reaches that point, bases in the Philippines, in Thailand potentially could be used by American forces, by Japanese forces, by Australian forces in an event of contingency. And then you have other countries like Singapore, for instance, or even Indonesia, which are non-aligned in terms of their formal diplomatic predisposition, but especially in the case of Singapore, it has emerged as a vital de facto ally of the United States. So, I mean, the joke is that, countries like the Philippines are allies that don't act like allies, while, countries like Singapore are not allies, but they act like allies, right? So this is also the situation we have. It's much more complicated than people being prevaricating, but it's more also a question of new alignments and dynamic realignments that are happening in the region.
Given all of that, would Southeast Asian nations, let's just say ASEAN, would it have been better placed if this visit didn't go ahead? Would that have been the preferred option for ASEAN nations?
Well, I'm sure even inside Taiwan, and as much inside in Washington, D.C., we have a lot of people who have raised their eyebrows and have been asking, okay, I mean, we appreciate the symbolism of this, but if China responds in an aggressive way, I mean, who are we going to fault here, right? I mean, you could say that maybe the U.S. was the one who provoked China, while others would say, let's also see what China will do, because if China shows restraint, and so far they have shown a degree of restraint, that also says something about rising China and what kind of superpower it's going to be in the coming decades. Now, as far as Southeast Asian countries are concerned, I mean, their hope is that China does not respond aggressively and doesn't deploy aircraft carriers, among others, and that the U.S. will not escalate it, because we don't want to be caught in between the giants as much as possible, including for U.S. treaty allies like the Philippines.
Do you think that there is a risk in the next few weeks, at least, that Beijing might become more assertive when it comes to the territorial disputes with Southeast Asian nations such as the Philippines, Indonesia, and so on and so forth?
Well, if you look at a technical textual analysis, the words that President Xi Jinping has used, or the statements that have come from Chinese, state-owned newspapers, they don't indicate the kind of aggressive response or military action we saw from China, let's say compared to 1995, 1996, the last time we had a huge crisis, military crisis in the Taiwan Strait. At the same time, we know that President Xi Jinping also is facing economic slowdown at home. He'll have a political transition later this year. So I think the timing militates against a much more militaristic response. But a kind of a mid-range, a shot across the bow kind of response, I think that is something we're going to see. But the problem, though, is mistakes can happen. You can have unintended clashes and incidents, and that's something we're very worried about. At the same time, as you correctly pointed out, the other question is, what is China going to do to Southeast Asian countries? Is it going to pressure Southeast Asian countries to distance themselves from Nancy Pelosi's visit, or even say something critical about it? So those are the things we're going to watch out. So a lot is really going to depend on what China going to do on both military and diplomatic front in the coming months and weeks.
Richard, always a pleasure talking to you. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us today, Richard Hederian.